The Supreme Court leak on the decision to overturn Roe v. Wade was a bombshell, and a lot of the consequences of that particular bombshell I covered in my last video, but I didn't get to cover as much as I wanted the leftist response to the leak, and that was because I made the video just right after the leak was actually revealed, about 24 hours after the fact. And so while I got a number of funny text posts, of which I got to include in the video, I didn't get to see the full extent of what the left was going to do with regard to this decision until a couple of days after the fact, when it was revealed that the left was going to respond in their quintessentially characteristic way of mostly peaceful violence. And they've done this through multiple firebombing attacks on pro-life organizations, attempting to forcibly break into Christian churches in order to protest abortion, and acting like deranged lunatics on the street constantly. They have done a really good job over the past week or so of convincing basically the entire country that they are utter lunatics.
It's none of your fucking business!
That is really what I take away from the past week. The fact of the matter is, no one looks at the left, which is firebombing houses or standing in front of Supreme Court justices' houses and berating them at night and committing felonies in the process, by the way, directly stated in section code by trying to influence a court decision through this sorts of protests. No one looks at that and says, yeah, I really want to be on those guys' side. No one does. Well, I guess I should make an addendum to that, because many leftist journalists, and most specifically the most prominent leftist journalist of Jen Psaki, who's moving on to MSNBC, has elicited no concern from the DOJ or any ethics violations whatsoever, has made her stance particularly clear, saying directly that not only her, but the entire White House supports the peaceful protests in front of the judges' houses, and explicitly says we encourage those exact protests.
So I know that there's an outrage right now, I guess, about protests that have been peaceful to date, and we certainly continue to encourage that outside of judges' homes, and that's the president's position.
Wonderful. Oh, man. Now, of course, there's an argument to be made here to give her the benefit of the doubt that she wasn't actually arguing that there should be protests in front of the justices' houses themselves, but instead that she just supports peaceful protests in general. But I'm not going to give her the benefit of the doubt, because I'm done doing that for leftists. And so I'm just going to assume that what she said is also what she meant. And that means that she is supporting people committing felonies against a co-equal branch of government. A wonderful way to convince people to raise your approval rating on the presidential polling. It's wonderful to see. And, well, it has not gone well on a myriad of factors, because though many people, including many people, as I stated in the last video, on the defeatist right, and even people who I would normally say aren't on the defeatist right, like James Lindsay, have been were arguing that this is a stupid thing for Republicans to do, to go after abortion. Oh, it's going to kill them in the midterms. Oh, we can't multitask. Well, turns out that in the week after the fact, there was basically no polling change whatsoever. And in fact, if you're going to make an argument in either direction, it's much easier to make the argument that the Republicans actually had a bump. And this is not said by some accurate polling firm like Rasmussen or by the People's Pundit. This is being said by CNN. So let's just say that all of the arguments about how abortion's a eminently popular idea that no one really has any problems with on any level is just a lie. Because, frankly, the way these polling questions were asked was always completely inaccurate and misleading to the people who were taking the polls, because they were asked in a general sense, not knowing anything of the law or what repealing Roe v. Wade would actually do, whether they supported the repealing of Roe v. Wade or not. And most Americans, not being legal analysts or having any idea on what the law actually states or what Roe v. Wade really is, beyond the fact that it is related to abortion, simply saying, yeah, sure, whatever. It's the same way that you can find a substantial amount of Americans in favor of most any proposition, particularly ones that give them more free crap or any of those sorts of things. Like, most Americans are in favor of universal health care in a vacuum without being told what the price tag is or any other of the countervailing factors that might preclude someone from being in favor of these sorts of things. And the same thing goes with abortion, because if there was going to be any windfall in favor of the Democrats after that whole thing, all of it would have been immediately destroyed by what the response from the left was, because what was it? A bunch of autistic screeching and screaming of demons and demon-possessed women all going around talking about how they want to kill babies because, well, they're the baby-killing side, and that's kind of what they argue for in public, at least when you're not talking about the highest echelons. They still have enough subtlety to at least pretend to not be in favor of outright killing babies. The same cannot be said for the underground protesters who totally lack that deftness with politics. And so we end in a bit of an impasse for the Democrats and the left in general, where now, instead of having a potential political advantage going into the midterms, they've completely destroyed any chance of that all on their own. And by the way, this is on top of the fact that the timing is all wrong. Because remember, we're still a couple of months out from the actual November elections for the midterms. And so anything that's being released now is going to have substantially less impact once we get to that point. Now, there's going to be another refresh of this once the actual decision is released in probably June or July, but that's still too early for this sort of thing to have a real impact on the elections. And even that bump is going to have a lesser impact than the initial bump that we're having right now. So, in reality, the abortion issue is going to be a no-go by the time of elections, assuming that Republicans don't overstep. Now, to be clear, I'm in favor of abortion never, and I am very much a pro-life person, and so I am in favor, long-term, of restricting abortion even more and doing that throughout all the states. Now, I don't see why we should need a federal law for this. I think that it's fine if we just roll it into the murder statutes of every state, which is where the murder statutes are, by the way, not in the federal courts, weirdly enough, at least for the most part. But, hey, it is what it is. I just prefer the feds just not get involved in general. Go figure. I'm a federalist, and so that's where I'm at with that. But at least for now, we shouldn't be pushing our. Let's not push our luck quite yet. Let's wait for them to bury themselves even further with their radicalism before we try and move further. That's all I'll say on that subject. But for now, we're in a good position, and frankly, the right has been making a lot of good moves over the past year or so, and a year and change at this point. And this is really echoing to me a lot of the same sorts of things that were going on with the school issue just a year ago. Because remember, in that case as well, Democrat policies are generally massively favored in terms of education, and for a very long time, it was considered that if it was an education election, the Democrat was going to win. But in 2021, when Glenn Youngkin goes on the education offensive and actually starts talking about the woke grooming that was going on in schools, suddenly this flips on a dime, and suddenly it's a winning issue for Republicans, which just shows the truth of all political issues, and that is, don't use your opponent's framing. And I'd go so as far as to say you shouldn't even use the abortion framing when talking about the abortion issue. At every chance you get, you should call people who are pro-abortion what they are. Baby killers and baby killer advocates and that sort of thing. Because that is an accurate depiction of what they are and what they support. So use that instead of letting them get around with euphemisms and stuff like that. That sort of thing is not useful in politics, especially when you're allowing your political opponents to get away with it to no benefit of your own. There's no reason that you should follow the left's framing on anything at all, especially on this issue. And that's, I think, where I'm going to leave you guys off. If you enjoyed, do in fact subscribe down below and check out my other platforms. I'm on BitChute, I'm on Odyssey, I'm on Rumble, I'm on Brighteon, I'm on all of those places, and all those links are down in the description, along with my Minds, my Gab, and my Getter page, and I suggest you go check all of those out. I'm KelKidman, this has been Breaking on the Daily. Don't be square.